Hello, welcome aboard the good ship Mo Lee. It's February 21st, 2018, a little bit after noon ship's time. Our position, excuse me while I check out the chart plotter, is 4546 south and 6517 east. Essentially, we're about 200 miles west of the Kerguelen Islands, and we'll pass about 100 miles north of them. I wanted to bring you up to date on some happenings over the last 3 days. Mo and I were overtaken by a very large low 3 days ago that has essentially changed the course of the voyage, and I wanted to tell you about it. This low, I've been tracking it since inception, really, through the weather forecasts. Lows in this quadrant can oftentimes come slanting down from the north, and in this particular case, this low developed off the coast of Rio de Janeiro and didn't look like much for the first maybe 3 or 4 days. But as it tracked down and started to slide under South Africa, under Cape Good Hope, it tightened up, got super well organized, and got huge. And I had seen this happening in the weather forecast, so I'd worked Mo up from, I think when I first started to see it, we were at 49 degrees south, pretty far south, and had gotten us up to, I think, as high as 46 and a half or 47 by the time the low approached. I was feeling pretty good about that. The weather forecasts were calling for 35 knots of wind from the west, the northwest, and the southwest in that quadrant, and that's easily handleable weather. I did also realize, however, just from experience, that I should add 10 to that, so 35 becomes 45. But again, we've seen much worse, so I wasn't feeling particularly worried. So put up the storm jib late in the afternoon of the day of arrival and just started to watch. And the one thing that was remarkable about this low was that as the winds built, the seas built much more quickly and much higher and much steeper, and were breaking. It was just crazy. I've never seen seas like we had in this particular low. By about 11 o'clock in the evening, I felt pretty good about things. We'd been thrown over once, but I made an adjustment to our course, made an adjustment to the way we were approaching. The stern of the boat was approaching the oncoming waves. I was feeling good about things, so I started to sleep at about 11. And then at 2, we were thrown over hard. And I came up on deck thinking, not knowing what I was going to find, but looked out to starboard here, where the starboard solar panel lives, and could see that the solar panel, which was lashed to the rail, had hit the water so hard that it bent the rail in over the winches. No other damage that I could see. Lines were all ahoo everywhere in the cockpit and up at the mast, but that's typically what happens. I jibed around so that we were taking the wind on starboard, and that gave us, again, a much shallower approach to the waves, and was feeling pretty good about that. Mo seemed to ride the breaking of swell pretty well. I was sitting up here in the pilot house, about an hour later, when we were hit again really hard. And this time we were hit like I've never felt before. It was like the boat was picked up and thrown to the ground by an enormous gorilla. And essentially, as we came down on our side, port side, the window here in the pilot house shattered. So this whole part of the boat, this whole half of the boat, port side, is underwater at that point. So water just gushed in. Green, cold seawater flowed in over the chart plotter, over the nav station, and then the boat righted, and all of that water went sloshing back over all of the electronics in that bay there. That was not great. I wasn't sure what to do first. It seems like there were 3 priorities. One was to stop the hole, another was to get the water out of the boat, and the third was to figure out finally how do we get Mo on a course that will keep her upright. And I wasn't sure how to do that. And I wasn't sure what to do first, so I pumped water for a little while until I had about half the water out of the bilge. The bilge was full. I had about half the water out of the bilge, and then decided that I could, with 2 hatch boards from the forepeak, I could bolt them together on either side of the window and keep the water out that way. So I did that, then continued pumping the water out. And finally, seems like the last thing to do, the only other choice we had in terms of keeping the boat safe, was to put Mo on drogue. So this turned out to be a real chore. One of the flaws, if you will, of the Jordan series drogue is just how difficult it is to deploy. I had flaked it neatly and beautifully into the port locker for just such a deployment, but hadn't anticipated that it would jostle itself down and deeper into the port locker, such that I actually had to hand over hand it all into the cockpit and reorganize it in the cockpit before I could deploy it. Of course, with the boat doing what it was doing in the seas that we had, it just took forever. So finally, it was about, I think, 10 o'clock in the morning, I finally get it deployed. And boy, the relief is amazing, because the drogue is beautiful. It just pulls the boat right in, stern into the sea, stops the boat cold, and you just feel under control. Huge relief. Come back below, start cleaning up. Water everywhere, broken glass everywhere. Anything that was not absolutely lashed down had been thrown into the center of the boat. It's the very definition of chaos. So I had begun cleaning that up, grabbing all the towels that I could get my hands on. A couple hours later, I look up and I notice from this window here that we're lying a hull, which was absolutely not what we should have been doing. I went into the cockpit and gave a big yank to the bridle that was holding the Jordan Series drogue to the boat. And I shouldn't have been able to move the bridle at all. With the weight of the boat on that bridle, it's like touching rock. And it yanked back. I mean, I could pull on it. Not great. I pulled it all the way in and found that there was no drogue attached. The drogue had parted at the eye splice that holds the drogue to the bridle. Now, I have lavished all kinds of care on the bridle. The bridle is old, the drogue is old. They've both seen a lot of action. I've lavished a lot of care on that bridle. But the drogue itself always looked near perfect, actually. The parachutes look great, the lashings look great, the splices look great. So I was really surprised, actually, to find that that was where the weak point was, and really bummed, because I had actually redone 2 of the splices on the bridle and could have easily taken care of that particular splice as well. So suddenly we're lying a hull. These are not the kind of seas one wants to lie a hull in. I don't know how high they were. Let's call them 25 feet. It's not really the height of them that was the problem. It was that they were super steep and crashing. There was these long lines of crashing wave, and the wave would throw the breaker forward. So, double or triple the speed of the approaching sea. Just incredible power, and would have rolled the boat, I have no doubt, if we'd gotten slammed while we were lying a hull. So I put Mo dead before the wind, and asked Monty to steer her under bare poles. I say asked because I tried that tactic during our first big blow back in December in the Pacific, only I tried to cant slightly on the approaching swell, and neither Monty, the monitor wind vane, which you can see right there, nor the autopilot could do that. They couldn't develop enough boat speed to get the rudder to dig in. But dead downwind was a different story. Dead downwind Monty could handle easily. In fact, Monty steered through the remainder of the gale that way without an incident. So that was how we ended that particular show. And so what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of a tour of the inside of the boat and what happened on the boat. And thank you very much for following along, and that's my report for today.